The buds of grass show a delicate green-yellow color, and the grey marble tombstones are neatly spread out. The masonry paths cross through them, and the big branches and leaves in twos and threes are densely scattered at the four corners. Tang An was lying on the grass, looking up at the domineering cat. It was squatting on the tombstone. Its fur was extremely white, and it was especially shiny under the sun. The tips of the hair seemed to be condensed with a little golden light. The cat is looking at him with a look of scrutiny. His expression is a bit serious, motionless, and a bit dazed. After watching it for a long time, he feels especially cute. Tang An yawned, sat up with squinted eyes, took out a bottle of milk, inserted the straw into the milk carton, and placed it in front of the cat's paw. The cat's domineering appearance was a little restrained, his eyes shone, and he looked sideways at Tang An. His tail shook, raised his paws to hold the milk carton, and slowly twisted his body, facing his butt. Looking at Zhaoan, then he grabbed the straw and drank the milk. Tang An watched with interest. There is no doubt that this is a very smart cat, and when these humanoid animals make some humanized movements and expressions, they will always make people feel very funny. I remember that the first time I met this white cat was 3 months ago. Tang An didn't pay much attention at the time. He just felt that the soft hair, unsuspecting posture, and clean paws all didn't look like the wild cat wandering outside looks like a queen. Later, I always came here, I could always see it, and gradually determined that it probably had no owner. Once Tang An was drinking milk, he walked over and looked at it, so Tang An poured some milk in front of him. However, it showed a look of disdain, with bulging eyes and a little anger. Tang An remembered that some well-trained pets love to be clean and have some particular eating habits, so he put the milk box in front of it. The cat still held his head high and dismissed it. When Tang An came for the second time, he did not give him the milk he had left, but put the milk box that he had just inserted into the straw and was ready to drink. He just wanted to tease him, but he did not expect it to bite. Drinking through a straw. So every time Tang An came, he would bring some milk and snacks to feed him. The cat would always appear nearby after Tang An came. Tang An felt a little strange. It didn't seem to be a pet kept by the cemetery manager. Know its origin. Tang An sometimes thought about taking it away, but because he wasn't sure whether it was a stray cat or a nearby house, he just thought about it. The sun slanted west, and the shadow of the tombstone on the ground elongated a lot. Tang An touched the cat, then lowered his head and gently stroked the tombstone. After a while, he stood up and cleaned up some of the trash left by him. He beckoned to the cat, turned and walked outside the cemetery. "Stop!" Tang An just turned around when he heard a girl's voice. The voice was soft and beautiful, with a little tenderness, and a feeling of arrogance, so he seemed extremely proud. The voice is still very nice, but how come a girl suddenly appears? The voice is very close, seems to be behind him. As if it had appeared suddenly, Tang An was surprised to find that the squatting cat was gone. Standing on the tombstone was a 13 or 14-year-old girl. She was wearing a white dress with delicate hollow lace at the hem. 2 golden ribbons embroidered with mysterious runes went around her slender white neck and hung on her chest. Her long hair swayed in the breeze, swaying into Tang An's sight from behind. An elegant and beautiful girl with a proud and indifferent look. Tang An opened her mouth slightly. It was the first time she saw such a delicate girl. With her fair and delicate skin, she felt flawless. Crafted dolls. Just wore a black tiger hat on her head, a bit like the one worn by Wei Xiaobao and Stephen Chow's version of the deer and the dingtail, and immediately destroyed her arrogant temperament in Tang An's heart. "Something?" Tang An asked suspiciously. Of course, it was not just why she called him to stop him. What he wondered was how she appeared here out of thin air, and the cat. In the corner of Tang An's eyes, the cat really disappeared. There was no movement at all just now, but it's not surprising that the cat, a small animal, came and went without a trace. "Your snacks and milk are good." The little girl stretched out a thin finger and pointed at Tang An, and then slowly dropped her finger, pointing to the snack bag that Tang An had not finished eating and was about to take home. Oh! Tang An prolonged his voice, then nodded, and laughed suddenly. That cat belongs to yours. He loves milk, and he eats a lot of snacks, especially melon seeds. At that time, it was much faster than me. It seems that the cat belongs to the little girl. Thinking about the cat's domineering look and the snow-white hair, it feels like it matches the little girl. Sure enough, there is a kind of pet for the owner. I am the cat. The little girl retracted her finger and pointed at herself. I am the king from the Beast Spirit Empire. How about it? Be scared. But don't be afraid, I will return the food you offer, which can be given your mighty power. Her voice is very crisp, a bit like a singing ending with a little aftertaste, and it sounds a little triumphant. The flashing luster in her eyes seems to be expecting Tang An to show a flattered expression, and then kneel down on her skirt. Next await her gift. The sun gradually weakened, but there was a bright breath. Tang An laughed. There is no doubt that the little girl liked her cat very much. She probably managed to find her cat with this childishness. Express her gratitude in a way. And the little boy liked to carry slogans such as Ultraman, Superman, and feel that their majesty is essentially the same. So Tang An laughed and shook his head. Tang An's reaction was beyond her expectation. The little girl raised her eyebrows and raised her chin slightly. Yu read www.yuyuganshu.com and then tilted her head and frowned. Don't you want strong power? Thank you, you should hurry up and find your cat, it seems to be gone again. Tang An waved his hand, eager to pat the little girl's head, presumably her hat must feel soft and comfortable to the touch. The little girl raised her head and looked up at the distant sky. It seemed that the light of the setting sun had also stung her eyes. She made up her mind and took off the hat on her head. Tang An felt a black streamer in front of him, and the thick and long hair swayed from under the hip line, filling Tang An's sight. Between the water and the light, the lonely and graceful night cuts off the cat's claws of the firefly, and bestows the true spirit of glory to the general dog. The little girl's clear voice sounded like a nightingale singing through the moonlight, sweet and lingering, but Tang An only felt a little dizzy, and then inadvertently, the little girl's waving fingers scratched his face. Mark! What are you doing? Tang An was surprised and pressed her cheek, feeling a little pain, as if she had been scratched. The little girl seemed to really think she was a cat, otherwise, why would she scratch? The little girl just looked at Tang An, her silent expression seemed to be waiting for something to happen, but the silent Tang An seemed to disappoint her, frowned and put her hand down. Little sister, I don't care about you, but it's wrong for you to do this. Don't do it in the future. Tang An sighed, forget it, and didn't bother to care about this kind of fantasy little girl. Tang An no longer hesitated, and walked out of the cemetery quickly. While waiting for the bus outside, the little girl did not chase it out. Tang An couldn't help thinking, maybe next time he comes, the cat will not show up again, it should be kept at home by this little girl. I don't know why this cat stayed here for more than 3 months. And this little girl was able to find a cat here, which is pretty amazing. Touched his face, Tang An was a little depressed, but forget it, he was a generous person, not to mention that the other party was just a little girl. Since he didn't plan to care about it, he wouldn't care about it anymore. An old man got in the car, Tang An stood up and gave up his seat. The old man praised Tang An for being a good guy, and Tang An smiled slightly and said that he was about to get out of the car. Tang An got off the bus at the next station, walked a few steps forward, and walked in along the fence covered with vines. This is an alley covered with blue stones, with antique window lattices and high-raised cornices. The unique temperament, hidden in the modern city, makes people suddenly enter the pure ancient town in a trance. Tang An walked to a courtyard, opened the door, looked at the shiny knocker, and walked in for a moment. This is Tang An's home. I have lived here since I was a child. It is also the only inheritance my mother left to me. In the city center of Zhonghai, where the land is so rich, the price of such a yard is very expensive. If Tang An sells this yard, he will be able to become a rich man in no time. But Tang An can't sell it. This is the legacy his mother left to him. It has memories from his childhood. Every corner and every piece of cake here reminds him of the warm and happy pictures. Picture. My mother has passed away, and I will never see her again, but Tang An will never let the courtyard where her breath remains. There is a patio in the yard, a rocking chair next to the patio, and a two-story small building next to it. Tang An went upstairs, took 2 copper bells, tied red patterned cloth strips on the copper bells, and then hung the 2 bells on the knocker of the door. Is different from the hot and bustling air in the city. It is dotted with green everywhere. After taking a deep breath, you can feel that the foul air you breathe out all day has been cleaned. Tang An was sitting in a rocking chair, a little worried. After his mother passed away, his aunt who had been taking care of him went back to his hometown. From then on, he will start living independently. There is nothing wrong with taking care of himself. The key is that independent living also means him. To support himself, his mother didn't leave him a bank account except for the house, so he had to make money on his own. For a 17-year-old boy, it is not easy to support himself in a high-consumption city like Shanghai. He still has more than $10,000 in his own bank card, but he has to pay the tuition at the beginning of school, etc. The money will be spent 7 or 88 when the school starts. Tang An didn't have much clue. Although he heard that there were some relatives of his mother in his aunt's hometown, Tang An didn't plan to seek help from relatives who had no contact. Asking for help can only get temporary help. You can't always ask for help. Tang An is a sturdy person. In his sense, his mother and relatives over there are very alienated. Naturally, Tang An would not have anything to do with these relatives. A feeling of closeness. It seems that I can only rent out the vacant house in the yard as my mother originally said. My mother had always had this plan. She said that the mother and son living in such a large yard was a bit empty, although Tang An had never been like this. He still remembers how many hiding places were difficult to find in such a big yard when he was a child. What a pity, no matter where he hides, his mother can always find him, quickly come out, then lift him aloft. It's a pity that when I grew up, I didn't play such naive games anymore. Tang An's eyes were a little moist. He got up from the recliner, went back to his room, and wrote a piece of rental on white paper with a brush. Notice, and then posted the notice on his door. Youth, you want to rent a house? Tang An just posted the notice, and someone stopped and watched. Yes, Mr. Yan. Tang An nodded, listening to his driver calling him Mr. Yan, and then passing by his house. The house number was written in Chinese, Pinyin, and Japanese with the words Yanjun. Tang An guessed that he was probably called Yanjun. Tang An lived here when he was a child, and slowly watched his old neighbors move away one by one. Those who relived in were both rich and expensive. Yanjun moved in 7 years ago during the financial crisis. The original owner of the house is said to have failed to invest and jumped off the building and died, and the yard is lost in Yanjun's hands. Is this character written by your father or grandpa? Yanjun looked at Tang An's writing and said with appreciation. I wrote it. Tang An shook his head. He had never seen his father since he was a child, let alone his grandfather, and has always lived with his mother. Jun Yan was a little surprised, and then nodded. Deep skill, there must be a famous teacher. This person does not rent a house, but is interested in Tang An's words. Tang An is not impatient, and smiles. Famous teachers are not counted, I was taught by my mother. I have been practicing since I was a child and have been practicing for more than 10 years. NS. Awesome. Jun Yan rubbed his few hair in amazement, and then asked, why rent a house? I have always heard that there is only one old tenant here, is it your home? NS. Yes, I want to rent a house, otherwise I won't have money to eat. Tang An smiled slightly. Why? Just your word. I'll give you an idea, you can sell the word. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com will definitely be able to sell for money. Yan Jun said in disbelief. The writing is a lot better, but fame is the key. For an unknown high school student, no matter how good the writing is, where can someone buy it? Tang An shook his head. This Mr. Yan is undoubtedly in his field of work. Successful people, but his idea is too unreliable. I mean selling Ling Tang's work. She must have her own work. If you don't mind, show me. Yan Jun stretched out his hand towards Tang An. Looking at this lean middle-aged man, Tang An still shook his head. My mother has passed away, and the only works she left are paintings, and I will not sell them. Yan Jun opened his mouth and put his hand on his head down, without saying anything. Tang An nodded slightly, turned around and walked into the yard, and then closed the door. The notice is posted on the door, and all you can see is the residents in this alley. Of course, these people can afford the rent given by Tang An, but they want to buy more, but they know a lot of wealthy people. Maybe it can spread the news, and it is possible for someone to rent a short-term lease due to work. But this kind of thing should be advertised. Tang An went back to the yard, took photos of the patio, zukang, rocking chair, small building and the interior of the house, and then posted a post on the internet. Tang An is very aware of the surrounding housing prices, so the rental prices he released are no different from those luxury villas. Tang An is not worried that people who fancy here will not be able to pay the rent. The most important thing is that he needs to check carefully. He doesn't want to have it. The villain comes to the door, and the guys full of bad habits and chaotic life are not welcome. Because it was posted on a popular website, a phone call came to consult soon after the release. Tang An was answering the phone all night, but basically all of them belonged to some intermediary companies. These listings are hard to come by. For intermediary companies, earning intermediary fees is the second most important thing. They want to rent out to be the second landlord. Tang An didn't want it, because if it was handed over to an intermediary company, he wouldn't be able to shut down the tenants. Tang An still had to live here. Of course, he didn't want to live with someone who looked uncomfortable. In the same yard, you can't see you looking up. At 12 o'clock, Tang An turned off the phone. It seemed that it was not easy to rent out the house. You must know that although many people saw the information he posted, not many could afford it. Tang An is not very anxious either. This kind of thing can only be weighted slowly, and the selection is done slowly. After turning off the phone, Tang An checked some information on the internet, and planned to go to the hardware market tomorrow to buy some materials. He planned to put it in the yard. The rocking chair has been refurbished to make the style of the yard more coordinated. This is a very exquisite yard. Tang An's Hansen skills have been very strong since he was a child, and he often repaired the yard piecemeal with his mother. Until now, such small repairs and tricks have been continuous. Yawned, looked at the grey moonlight in the sky, Tang An took a bath and went to sleep. Tang An's sleep has always been very good. It's just that I didn't sleep well tonight. When the day was light, half asleep and half awake was a dream. What he dreamed was the cat that often appeared next to his mother's cemetery. That delicate and immature little girl. Feeling the corners of his mouth moist, Tang An wiped his mouth and woke up, stretched his waist, moved his body comfortably, squinted his eyes to adjust to the dim light outside the window, and then sat up straight. How could you dream of that little girl? And her appearance turned out to be so clear, it didn't look like a dream, but she saw her with his own eyes. As for the dream, Tang An didn't remember it very clearly, as if the little girl was floating around and the cat ran over. Run, and then the little girl turned into a cat for a while, and the cat turned into a little girl for a while, all messed up. It's been a long time since she had such a dream. Tang An lifted the quilt to get up, and walked to the bathroom. Just after 2 steps, Tang An felt something was wrong. There seemed to be something hanging behind his buttocks. After touching it with his backhand, it turned out to be a fluffy thing. Tang An was puzzled and turned his head and saw that there was an extra on his butt. A tail. Tang An's hand holding the tail stiffened, his eyes staring at the tail, and then he pulled it hard, and suddenly felt a slight pain and the feeling of being pulled from his body. This thing, actually, it seems, it's long. On myself. Tang An was taken aback, and hurriedly grabbed his tail and ran to the bathroom to look in the mirror carefully and observe carefully. After a while, Tang An patted his head and sat on the chair, confirming that his was indeed growing. A tail, instead of rushing to his house in the middle of the night to put a tail on his ass. This is not someone else's prank, but he grew a tail overnight. Ancestral phenomenon. Tang An was surprised and suspicious, staring at the dark, thick, soft, and shiny tail. How could he be like this? Tang An hurriedly closed the door, sat in front of the computer in a hurry, and began to search for the return to ancestor phenomenon, carefully consulting the information. The reversion phenomenon is not too uncommon. There are fur boys who caused a sensation many years ago, and the little girl with a long tail recently. But these reversion phenomena are all born, not like me overnight. It has a tail. Tang An turned off the information and found nothing. There was no way to explain his current situation. Patted the mouse with some annoyance, Tang An felt his tail and worried, what should he do now? Go to the hospital? Tang An hesitated and sat down again. Now that medicine is advanced, it is not difficult to cut off this tail, but what is the reason for his long tail? Tang An didn't want to be regarded as a research object, and he didn't want to let everyone know about his long tail. Tang An will not go to the hospital without a last resort, and it is best to solve this problem by himself. Do you want to get some surgical instruments yourself and cut them off by yourself? Such a thought made Tang An a little worried, but forget it. It is too risky to operate on himself. This is not cutting trees and cutting wood. Now that he looks like this, there is no way to go out. Tang An looked at the bright sky outside the window, reluctantly put on a compassionate shirt, but temporarily couldn't wear his pants. Touching his tail, immersed in an unthinkable emotion, Tang An couldn't help thinking, is it just that he is dreaming, and the dream has not yet woken up? This thought gave him a glimmer of hope, and then pulled it hard, telling him with a painful feeling that his hope was immediately shattered. Thinking of dreaming, Tang An thought of the little girl, stood up abruptly, and remembered what the little girl said. I am the cat. Is she really a cat? So this own tail is also a cat tail? It doesn't look like it. The cat's tail is not so big and thick. The true spirit that bestows the glory of General Canine. Is this her gift? General Canine. What is the true spirit of General Canine glory? This refers to this tail. Is this a dog tail? Although my associations feel a little absurd, it seems that such associations are not so incredible in the face of things like my own tail growing overnight. Without a clue, Tang An's thoughts may be involved in what seems to be the truth. Tang An seemed to have grasped the life-saving straw, unable to find relevant information on the internet, and it was impossible to rashly disclose his situation and go to the hospital for help. First, to find the little girl to see if there are any relevant clues is the only thing Tang An can do now. The cemetery didn't open until 9 o'clock in the morning, but Tang An couldn't wait to go out. In order to hide the tail, Tang An stuffed it into his trousers and tied it with a belt, and then tied a sports jacket around his waist to cover it. The bumps on the buttocks look like they are doing morning exercises. Although this kind of dress is a little strange in this season, it is better than undisguised. With some guilty conscience, he opened the door and Tang An looked around. Early in the morning, except for a maid wearing an apron and hurried back with a basket, there was no one else. Tang An quickly walked out and found the door. The rental notice is gone. Maybe those intermediaries did it. In order to monopolize the listings, they tear up the notice posted by the landlord. This is their usual method. Tang An is not in the mood to care about this now, and hurried to the street. I caught the early train, but fortunately there were seats. Tang An quickly sat down. There was a tail on his hips. It felt weird to sit down. Tang An couldn't help thinking of the dog's sitting posture. Maybe it would be comfortable to sit like that? But how could Tang An squat on the seat like that? Sitting in a seat is better than standing. Tang An feels that if he stands, he will definitely stand upset. He is always worried that others will feel strange when they touch him. He is wary of whether there are grandpas and aunts getting on the bus along the road, if they stand. If he had to stand up by his side, it would be too tangled. Fortunately, there was no need for a seat on this road. When he arrived at the cemetery, Tang An quickly got off the car. The door of the cemetery was opened. The concierge, Uncle Zhao, put a radio on the grass and was dancing to the rhythm. Little Apple saw Tang An and said, "It's so early, didn't you just come here yesterday?" Uncle Zhao's smile is very sunny. He is a healthy and kind old man. He often sees Tang An coming to visit his mother. There are not many young people who are filial like this. If you die, your children can be like this from time to time. Come and see yourself, instead of having to wait until the New Year's Day to deal with it. That would be great. I don't feel lonely in the coffin anymore. It's okay anyway, just come and see more. Tang An said in response, smiling, and hurried in. The cemetery in the morning is filled with mist, the looming tombstones and the tender yellow grass, as well as the sunlight penetrating the fog, did not make the place present a feeling of spirituality or death, but unexpectedly it was quiet and quiet. Atmosphere, the impatience in people's hearts also settles down. In such a place, thinking about the bones buried in it will always make people feel a lot of emotion. Tang An usually has mixed feelings, but not now. Now he is worried about his tail, feelings and epiphanies, only when he is full and has nothing to do. Mom, I have a tail. Tang An, who had been keeping a calm look when he came to his mother's tombstone, burst into tears. In the face of a mother, whether she is alive or dead, there is always no need to conceal anything when a son is a child, and a son doesn't have to worry about her mother as a monster. It's always the most appropriate thing to confide in her. Assured. It's a pity, now she has no way to comfort him, just like when he was bitten by a puppy at home when he was a child, and he was worried about whether he would become a puppy or not. Tang Andong looked away, looking for the big white cat, or the little girl wearing a tiger hat claiming to be a cat and the king of the beast spirit empire. Tang An cannot be sure if she is really a cat, even if it is nothing strange. After all, he has grown a tail, so it is entirely possible that a cat becomes a little girl, or a little girl becomes a cat. I always have to find it or her, but there is no movement around. There is no arrogant pace of the cat in the diffuse fog, and no long flowing hair and white skirt of the little girl. After waiting for a while, Tang An was walking around in the cemetery. In front of the neat tombstones, there were scattered flowers and some sacrifices that had not been taken away. There were also some traces of memorials that had not been in front of the tombstones for a long time. Circle, disturbing the morning sleep of the dead, but never saw the cat. The little girl does not show up, and the cat is gone? Tang An remembered that the cat appeared when he came to visit his mother alone for the first time. Since then, without exception, he can always see it slowly. Tang An found out with annoyance that the most blundering part of him was that he was in a hurry and he didn't bring snacks and milk, otherwise, the greedy cat would definitely show up. Although it is always very arrogant, Tang An found that it sucked the milk cleanly without a drop, and as long as Tang An did not stop to give it something to eat, it could continue to eat, even if the stomach was swollen. And will not let go of the snacks delivered to the mouth. After a round, Tang An returned to his mother's tombstone for nothing, but was pleasantly surprised to find that the cat appeared again. It was stalking its neck, staring at the sky, and squatting proudly on the tombstone. "Mother cat, you finally showed up!" Tang An almost cried with joy. The white cat lowered his head, turned his head left and right, looked at Tang An with his hands empty, and narrowed his eyes. However, his whole body fell on his stomach, lying on the tombstone unmovingly. "Don't ignore me. Don't be disappointed. I forgot today. I will buy you a large box of milk later, so that you can soak and bathe." Tang An can understand its expression. A magical cat, it may even be a little girl, so Tang An communicated with it directly, not doubting that it didn't understand what he meant. "Really?" Without warning, the white light flashed, and the white cat disappeared without a trace. "The little girl I saw yesterday stood on the tombstone, her black hair fluttering, her eyes gleaming, and her face looking forward to it." Looking at Tang An with satisfaction. Rao is that Tang An already has a certain ability to accept scenes that subvert his own worldview. Such a big change that appeared out of thin air still scared him, stepped back a few steps, and then slowly nodded. The little girl was still exactly the same as yesterday, except that Tang An noticed that she did not wear shoes and stepped barefoot on the shimmering tombstone. Several toes were round like pearls. Perhaps it was the cool tombstone that stimulated her. On the soles of the feet, those toes wiggled restlessly. "You get down first and don't stand on the tombstone. It is impolite and disrespectful to the deceased." Tang An is used to the cat lying on his mother's tombstone. He always feels that it is a kind of company, but he is not used to having someone standing on it. "I was scratched by her paw yesterday and didn't pay attention to this matter, but today I have to talk about it. Go by." The little girl didn't care, she jumped down and stood in front of Tang An, looking at him with her head up. The joy on her face turned into a blank expression, but her eyes were still wide open. "Yes," looking at Tang An shiningly, "it seems that Tang An is the big box of milk. Wait. Why did you let me grow a tail?" Witnessing a cat turning into a girl, Yu reading www.yuuganshu. The unbelievable scene like Com can fully corroborate that the only reason for the supernatural change in him can only be her. Tang An didn't come to buy milk for her. He had to solve his own problems first. "Ah, oh, you have a tail." The little girl tilted her head and looked at Tang An's side, her head full of long hair shaking as her body tilted, and then she looked at Tang An with her natural eyes. "This is the glory I bestow on you. It really is you." Tang An said excitedly, "I don't want such glory, who wants to grow a tail? Is it good for a long tail to come out?" The little girl looked at Tang An very strangely, "The first time I heard that someone doesn't want to have a tail by themselves. What's so good about a long tail?" Tang An asked rhetorically. "A lot of benefits. For example, you can wrap your tail around the trunk and hang yourself upside down on the tree to play. For example, you can show your tail to the beautiful opposite to woo. For example, you can also roll around with your tail. Go play games." The little girl stretched out a few fingers to give examples, and then said impatiently, "In short, there are many benefits. Hang yourself upside down on a tree to play? Show your tail in courtship? Roll around holding your tail? What's fun in this? I don't want to be fun, I just want this tail to disappear." Tang An shouted in a low voice, "I am worried that if someone who came to pay memorial service in the morning finds that he is yelling here, he will be regarded as crazy." The fog dissipated a lot, and the sun was sparsely falling on the black hair of the little girl's hips. She reached out and held her tiger hat, and then looked at Tang An dissatisfiedly. "As long as you can make my tail missing, I will buy you a big box of milk." Since the cat is her, there is no doubt that this is the bargaining chip that can impress her the most. Tang An is anxious to let her this tail disappears, and he can pay any price. "You promised to give me a big box of milk." The little girl put a finger between her and Tang An. "2 boxes. If you let my tail disappear, I will give you 2 boxes." Tang An said quickly. "Are there 2 boxes in total, or 3 boxes in total?" The little girl stretched out one finger in one hand, and 2 in the other, and then put them together again. "Really bargain, how much does it cost for 3 cartons of milk?" Tang An said openly, there are 3 boxes in total. The little girl smiled suddenly, her eyes gleaming, and she looked at Tang An contentedly. Tang An also looked at her. The king from the Beast Spirit Empire, do you use magic, or is it a supernatural power with another name? Just like chanted yesterday. Where is the milk? She waited for a while and said. You lose the tail for me first, and I'll buy you milk. I can't always carry 3 boxes of milk with me. Tang An patted his forehead and said, unexpectedly she would have to take delivery first before doing business. But this is basically a problem that she should solve by herself. How did she beg her by herself? Forget it, I'm too lazy to bargain with this magical creature to make sense. Okay. The little girl nodded, took off her tiger head hat again, and looked majestic. Tang An also waited sternly, excited, and the tail disappearing quickly was one of the reasons. In addition, he was a little excited that he was about to see a mysterious and magical power that surpassed everyone's cognition. I am the king, I am the glory of the empire, and the cat's claws will return to my hands, and the knight's minions will lose their glory and sharpness. She sang, and gently ran her fingers across Tang An's face. Tang An only felt a little itchy, obviously she didn't scratch a few more marks on his face. Waiting for her to sing, Tang An couldn't wait to touch it with his backhand. Sure enough, that tail was gone. Tang An couldn't help being overjoyed, even though this was obviously a problem she created. Tang An actually thanked her a little, and then he realized. This thing is simply unlucky, kindness is not rewarded, and she always gives her milk and snacks. She let him grow a tail. You wait. I'll buy you milk now. Tang An is a generous person and doesn't care a lot, not to mention that she was kind enough to give him back, but her return was not what he wanted. Tang An touched his ass, secretly grateful for it, but fortunately it quickly disappeared. Sometimes when he saw some people with deformities, he would feel uncomfortable besides sympathizing with him. If he was himself, he would be very painful. I didn't expect that he really had a long tail. If it didn't disappear, other people would know it sooner or later. Then he would be watched for sympathy, and he would be treated as a monster. The little girl nodded, and sat on the grass next to her with her skirt. She straightened her legs and put her hands in front of her abdomen, as if she was planning to wait quietly for Tang An to deliver the milk. By the way, what is your name? Tang An asked curiously. After his troubles were solved, countless curiosity burned in his heart. Nan Mao 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 Mao, this is the most noble name of the Beast Spirit Empire. The little girl looked up proudly. Tang An couldn't help but laughed out, Nan, then, 5 cats followed, which is your name? The delicate eyebrows wrinkled, and the little girl's beautiful eyes were filled with innate majesty. She opened her mouth slightly, and slowly said, it's very impolite to make fun of other people's names. You can even say no. Bring up, at your mother's grave, it's shameful for you to smile like this. Hearing her talking like this, Tang An was embarrassed, smirked, and quickly apologized, I'm sorry, in our world, there is no such name. The first time I heard it, I didn't mean to make fun of it. Well, go and come back soon. The little girl nodded, still very majestic. Then, I call you Nan Mao, right? Tang An asked tentatively, walking out. The little girl just looked non-committal. Tang An walked 2 steps, then turned around and looked at the girl who was sitting motionless, named Nan Mao 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 Mao, and called her Nan Mao. Nan Mao looked sideways at Tang An. Her movements were always very gentle, full of arrogance, especially her eyes. It seemed that the other party should immediately understand what to do when looking at her eyes. Can you come with me to get milk? It would seem strange if I ran to the cemetery with 3 boxes of milk. Tang An thought for a while and everyone in the cemetery knew him. He came over with 3 boxes of milk, and then left empty-handed. Everyone would find it strange. Where did anyone bring 3 boxes of milk to memorial service? Nan Mao hesitated, and shook his head resolutely, I won't leave here. Why? Are you trapped here by some mysterious magic circle, or is there a hidden space here? Tang An has seen a lot of fantasy stories, and he can't help but start his imagination. It's safe here, Nan Mao said slowly. Tang An understood what she meant. For her, this cemetery was a familiar place and a safe place, while outside was an unknown world, a dangerous place. But as an ordinary Chinese citizen who grew up in peaceful times in Tang An's eyes, except for the places marked dangerous, the world around him is extremely safe. This is a city without guns and all kinds of gangs running rampant or even dividing dangerous areas. You haven't left here yet? Tang An asked. He felt that the Beast Spirit Empire must be another world, and the Southern Cat came from another world, and this cemetery was where she descended. There should be no place on the earth that hides a Beast Spirit Empire. Why should I leave here? Nan Mao said loudly, then stood up and pointed at Tang An, go buy milk. Tang An didn't say anything anymore. It made people feel strange. So he turned his head and walked out of the cemetery. From a distance, he saw that the little girl disappeared on the vegetable field again, and replaced by the big white. The cat, lying lazily on the tombstone, yawning and basking in the sun. Cemetery has self-operated shops, mainly some memorial supplies, but also a few daily necessities, but there is no milk, let alone 3 boxes of milk. Although there are buses, this is a relatively remote place. Tang An took the bus and came back. It took almost an hour. Why are you back again? Uncle Zhao asked enthusiastically, seeing the 3 cartons of milk he was carrying. Filial piety is a good thing, but his mother can't drink milk anymore. It seems to have pulled something, look for it. Tang An made an excuse. Look carefully, it seems that the piece of your house hasn't been there just now. If it fell somewhere, it should be there. Find it hard. Uncle Zhao urged. Tang An smiled and nodded, and then thought for a while to go out over the wall, lest Uncle Zhao wondered where his milk went. When walked to the tombstone, the white cat had already turned into a little girl. Nan Mao slowly held her hands on her chest, pursed her lips, and looked at the 3 boxes of milk carried by Tang An with gleaming eyes. Why do you like to drink milk so much? Tang An put down the milk, pressed the back of his waist and asked. 3 boxes of milk said whether it was heavy or not. Because there is nothing to eat. Nan Mao said naturally, glanced at Tang An, and said indifferently, I am a king beyond ordinary beast spirits. It doesn't matter if I don't need to eat. Tang An still feels very pitiful, not to mention what kind of king of the beast spirit empire she is. Think about a little girl trapped in this cemetery all day, dare not go out, and have nothing to eat, only to wait until every time he comes here. To have some milk and snacks, how sad it is. Nan Mao looked at the milk box, looked left and right, and circled the box. Only then did she find a hole to open the box. Tang An clearly saw the light flashing in her eyes at the moment the box was opened. It feels like Alibaba found the treasure house of the 40 thieves. A box of milk was neatly packed in the box. Nan Mao squeezed his fist, then stretched out a finger, and pointed it again and again, and then counted it again. Then he took a box with satisfaction. Coming out, plugged a straw in, pursed his lips, and started drinking milk with his cheeks bulging. Seeing her seriousness in drinking milk, Tang An was embarrassed to disturb her, but after she finished 1 bottle, she did not hesitate to drink the 2nd bottle, then the 3rd bottle, and Tang An didn't hesitate until the 4th bottle. Said, drinking so much milk at once is not good, do you plan to drink it all at once? Nan Mao looked at the box and noticed that it was missing. He looked at the milk in his hand a little embarrassingly. He hesitated for a moment, then slowly stuffed the straw in, and continued to drink slowly. After drinking this bottle, he touched his abdomen. Nan Mao held down the milk box, then sat next to it, hugged 3 boxes of milk tightly, and said to Tang An, I'm the rest of. I'm not going to fight with you. Nan Mao, I ask you, do you really come from another world? For you, is our world a completely different place? Tang An's tail is gone. Of course, I am in the mood to satisfy the many doubts in my heart. This is almost as if I am witnessing the events of the Big Bang of a century. Countless people have imagined, fantasized, demonstrated, or doubted whether other worlds exist. Kind of thesis, witnessed in front of his eyes. This should be a more significant moment in the history of human exploration of nature, surpassing events such as the Apollo moon landing. Tang An feels so. My name is Nan Mao 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 Mao. You can also call me Her Majesty the Queen. Although I don't have direct lord power over you now, it will be a matter of time. Nan Mao drank milk and half squinted. He tried to maintain his majesty and said, "How did you come into this world?" Tang An didn't quite understand what lord power and why it happened sooner or later. He paid more attention to issues involving time and space and travel. This is the most instinctive curiosity of a normal human being. Nan Mao's expression was serious and majestic, and he glanced at Tang An with a little caution, and then the vigilance eased again. I have been called to come to the mysterious world to rescue my people. Yours is the mysterious world. No, for you, ours is indeed the mysterious world. Tang An was surprised to find out. You mean, we have many people in your world, or cats? Nan Mao stood up, carrying her skirt, and wanted to walk to the tombstone. After thinking about it, she stood on her 3 boxes of milk, so she stood at a higher position and looked down at Tang An. The information I got from the call I sensed is that the world is terrifying. My people have been enslaved. They have completely lost the ability to fight and become ordinary human pets. Nan Mao opened his arms and faced the sun. The sun fell on her soft Tijriad hat. Nan Mao took a deep breath and said, "They are not just cats, but also dogs. I am their king. Across time and space, all cats and dogs are mine. People, you reading www.yuyuganshu.com. I want to save them. The king of cats, and dogs?" Tang An circled Nan Mao. No wonder she has the ability to make him grow his tail, but what makes Tang An curious is, you have to take all the cats in our world. Do dogs bring back your world? I have a more far-reaching plan, but I won't tell you, because this is a magnificent, lofty, cruel plan full of war and conquest. Nan Mao helped his tiger hat. Only a king like me can come up with such a plan. A weak and ordinary person like you is incomprehensible, because people at different positions and heights have completely different ways of thinking about problems and analyzing things. Do you want to conquer our world? Tang An felt that her words fully exposed a lot of information, but he did not feel the threat of invasion on the earth, because the king of the Beast Spirit Empire still dare not step on it. Out of the cemetery. Nan Mao's pupils shrank for a while, watched Tang An vigilantly, and said word by word, "I didn't expect you to guess my plan. It seems that I underestimated your ability. I was giving it yesterday. When you have power, you want you to become a pioneer in my exploration of this world. Say it, guessing my plan, are you planning to mobilize the power of the world to deal with the crisis? It's not necessary, right?" Tang An stretched his hands. "You see, you don't even dare to go out of this cemetery. I just take care. After all, I am the king of the Beast Spirit Empire and cannot easily take risks." A thin blush appeared on Nan Mao's cheeks, and she stared at Tang An a little bit ashamed. "I want to go out." "You can go out anytime." Tang An didn't believe it very much. He felt that Her Majesty the Queen was actually a bit timid. Tang An is a person who cares about other people's faces, so he doesn't stimulate the little girl's sensitive self-esteem, nodded, and then said, "Actually, you can explore this world yourself. This world is not as dangerous as you think, especially as long as you don't turn into a cat and walk outside." "I am a cat, why can't I walk outside as a cat? This is why your world must be punished." Nan Mao said with a little excitement, "One day, I will let all my people live freely in this world, and humans will return to their original positions, accept my rule, and become servants of the cats and canines." Although there are many people who love small animals, many stray dogs and cats are indeed vulnerable to danger, especially the southern cat. If she wanders outside in the form of a cat, she is very likely to be caught. After all, she is like that. Everyone can see that his hair is a very expensive type. Of course, judging from her ability to make people grow a long tail, Tang An doesn't think she will really be in danger, but the people who catch her will be in danger. In Tang An's consciousness, most of the creatures in this different world with mysterious powers came to the earth arrogantly or unscrupulously. Those who have been secretly hiding in the cemetery like Nan Mao are completely out of his expected. So now Tang An is not very afraid of Nan Mao. No matter what plan she said to conquer the world and attack all mankind, he was not worried about the survival of the race. He was just curious and found it interesting. Cat spirit tribe and canine spirit tribe? You mean, besides cats like you, there are dogs that can become humans. They are canine spirit tribe. Tang An involuntarily touched his butt, feeling relieved. The feeling of not having a tail is good, he doesn't want to become a canine. In the Beast Spirit Empire, our cat spirit tribe is a royal family, occupying the highest stratum of the entire empire, and an absolute ruler. The canine spirit tribe is a nobleman, controlling the military power of the empire. Nan Mao raised her head slowly and slowly walking on the ground. I felt Tang An's sneer that he didn't know how to lift up. The spiritual technique I released yesterday is to allow you to become a canine general under my command. It's a pity. This is probably the most straightforward way to explain XX is a running dog of such and such. Tang An is not interested in being a dog general. It is one thing to be interested in things in a different world. To become a strange creature by himself, then it's another matter. It's not a pity. Tang An waved his hand quickly, thought about it, and said, although I don't want to be your dog general, if you want to know about our world, I can still tell you. In the face of the Queen of the Beast Spirit Empire who wants cats, and dogs to rule the earth, is Tang An's behavior considered a rape? Tang An thinks it's not counted. After all, he's just chatting with her, and over the years, the amount of information about the Earth that people on Earth have deliberately or unintentionally spread to the outer planet is too much to calculate. The earliest film TV series E Lovelacy, the propagation signal has expanded to more than 6,000 galaxies. Nan Mao hesitated for a while, then began to open the milk box again, took a carton of milk in his hand, stretched out his finger and clicked on the remaining milk, a little distressed to find that it was missing a lot, and then took it out again. Putting the carton of milk back, shook his head and said, no. Although it is the most effective way to learn information from the local indigenous people in a strange place, I need to observe and master some information by myself before I can find it in a targeted manner. Questions can tell whether the information you provide is valid or credible. You still don't believe me? Tang An said unhappily, if I want to harm you, I might as well put poison in the milk. Hearing Tang An's words, Nan Mao took out the box of milk and put it in, and slowly sucked it up. After sucking into the milk box, the Nan Mao squinted. The eyes said, I am a cat spirit clan, and the cat spirit clan has keen direct and hostile spying ability, let alone I am the king of the cat spirit clan? You are not hostile to me, I know. I don't believe it. But because you believe that you are useless, you are an ordinary human in this world, your perspective on the problem, the way you think, and the channels through which you obtain information, all bear the inherent stigma of ordinary humans. Is closely related to the hostility of the world towards us. I need a lot of basic knowledge to identify the information you speak and delete and select the information that is really useful to me. This is not something that you can do by listening to you. It's here. I have to get out of here myself, walk around, see, smell. Walk around, take a look, smell. Tang An remembered, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. She is a cat spirit. Well, when are you going to go out? Tang An always felt that it was a bit too pitiful for her to hide in this cemetery. Maybe it's just a few days. I will leave when I'm ready. Nan Mao thought for a while and said, although I took back the glory, you'd better maintain some exercise today to prevent the glory from returning. The straightforward way is to run back to your home from here. The human cemetery will always be far away from your home. If you run back at this distance, you can prevent the phenomenon of returning glory. Then I'll run back now. Tang An was taken aback. He knew that the glory in Nan Mao's mouth was the tail. He didn't expect to consolidate the effect of removal like this, so he didn't have the leisure to continue here with Nan Mao. Chatting. Yet. Nan Mao nodded expressionlessly, and the two round ears on the tiger's hat trembled. Where is this milk? Tang An thought of Uncle Zhao. Nan Mao grabbed a box of milk and put it under his skirt. The box of milk disappeared. After repeating it 3 times, the 3 boxes of milk disappeared without a trace. Tang An was stunned again, but now he is more concerned about the problem of not recurring his tail, so he started running, and said, I will come to you again in 2 days. Next time I will bring you fruit-flavored milk. Apples. Banana milk, apple milk? Nan Mao tilted his head to look at Tang An's back, raised his head, and pursed her lips. The rising sun and the light radiated from Nan Mao's eyes sparkled and her lips were moisturized. Bright. Tang An is a clever teenager. Most of the time, his performance is quite rational and appropriate, but he is just a teenager after all. When many accidents happen, it is inevitable that he will be exposed to the frankness of this age. How about Nan Mao say, what he did? When Tang An left the cemetery, Uncle Zhao was not at the door to save him from asking where Tang An's milk had gone. Tang An watched a bus leave, worried that his tail would grow again, so he raised his leg and started running. Up. Zonghai in August, after the sun came out, it was a bit hot, but this couldn't shake Tang An's determination at all. It would take about 30 or 40 minutes by bus. It's really not easy to go back this way. Was wearing loose sportswear when he went out. At this time, he took off the clothes around his waist and held it in his hand, which was also a look of exercise. Tang An didn't want to have a long tail, and knew that running back was a difficult task, but with the determination to do so, he still found it easy to run. However, after running for a while, Tang An found that this kind of ease seemed a bit too much, and moved forward. The steps didn't feel heavier at all, but they became lighter and lighter, the muscles were endless, and the soles of his feet seemed to be supported by airflow, giving him a smart and elegant feeling of running. This kind of feeling is enjoyable. Maybe those runners are looking for this kind of feeling. Tang An thought. After half an hour of running, he found that he was as relaxed as always. Running under the scorching sun is better than walking in the garden. Tang An felt something was wrong. He knew very well that his physical strength had not reached this level. Although he exercised regularly, he was still very different from professional long-distance runners. Her current physical stamina is still very abundant. Tang An stopped to observe him. There was no change. Sweat was dripping on his skin. Tang An asked for a bottle of mineral water in a small shop on the roadside and drank it in one breath. He noticed that there were fine beads of sweat on his nose. Many people are like this. They sweat a lot on their noses during exercise, and Tang An also does this, but he feels that his nose sweats a little today. At the same time, although the body is not abnormal, the palms and soles of the feet are also sweaty. More than usual. Ran home, these abnormal conditions should have disappeared. Tang An didn't care about the unusual physical condition, and planned to continue after drinking a whole bottle of mineral water. Young man, running on a hot day, be careful not to get heat stroke. A middle-aged man walked out of the convenience store and said, looking at Tang An. It's okay, I'm used to it. Tang An said with a smile. Is it a professional runner? The middle-aged man asked leisurely. Tang An also took a look at him. Tang An was running on a hot day, but the man was wearing a neat suit and a dark color. Looking at a black Mercedes next to him, the man seemed to have gotten out of the car. Looking at his rather sturdy neck and powerful, wide palms, Tang An figured out that he was probably the kind of driver and bodyguard. No, try and challenge the lower limit. Of course, Tang An wouldn't say that he didn't want to grow his tail to run like this. How far are you going to run? The middle-aged man asked next. All the way to Wutong Lane. Tang An said, Wutong Lane, a common name, means that there are not many old houses and bungalows in China. It just so happens that I want to go to Wutong Lane. If you don't want to run, take my car over. The middle-aged man enthusiastically suggested. For young people, adults are always more willing to show some enthusiasm and kindness. Tang An shook his head and said, Thank you, but I still have to run by myself. You go first, and you won't be delayed. The middle-aged man smiled, then walked back to the Mercedes-Benz car and drove away. Tang An had no need to rest, and was still very physically fit. He ran after the Mercedes-Benz, but of course he couldn't catch up with the car. Although the Mercedes-Benz stopped by the red street light in front, he waited until Tang. When An came to the intersection, the car had disappeared. After a while, Tang An's phone rang and glanced at the serial number of a few lucky numbers. It was probably not the intermediary company that couldn't call it. As expected, he saw Tang An's small advertisement and came to see the room in person. People. Tang An calculated the time and asked the other party to wait a while, so he speeded up. He didn't intend to delay the elimination of his tail hazard for renting a house. He still had to run back instead of interrupting running and taking a car in order to rush back. When he ran to Wutong Lane, Tang An was a little out of breath, and his stamina was not limitless. It seemed that the abnormal condition would also disappear, but Tang An was very satisfied, as tired as a dog. Seeing the Mercedes-Benz that he had seen at the door of the convenience store, Tang An felt a little coincidental. When he came to his door, he saw the middle-aged man talking to him. Could it be that you want to see the house, right? Tang An said with a smile. It's just coincidence, it seems that your house should belong to me. The middle-aged man laughed. As he said, he took out his business card. There was a name and phone number on it, but there was no title. Ye Gang, an almost masculine name, fits his image very well. Let's make it clear first. I also stated in the post that the house is only rentable but not for sale. Tang An has a good impression of this middle-aged person. There should be no problem with renting to this kind of person. It doesn't seem that difficult to get along with people. Look at the house first, and take a look. Ye Gang was still smiling. For him, he didn't mind that the other party said the words to death at the beginning. Things were all discussed. Tang An opened the door, Ye Gang walked in, took a cursory glance and then nodded, yes, not bad. Except for the smaller one, this house is very good. Generally speaking, it is always necessary to pick something wrong to facilitate bargaining or to reach an agreement, but Ye Gang does not seem to be doing this, but an attitude of discussing the matter. Probably in his eyes, the single-family house campus seems to be only a sophisticated room type, rather than luxurious mansion. Ye Gang's next words also confirm that he just thinks the house is not big, but appreciates it very much. This tree is some years old, and the direction of the branches is very suitable for repair. The marble in this patio is especially polished and beautiful. Bamboo and rockery are very ink-washed. These two small buildings, this one is the main building. The corridor in the middle is also very well designed. Has it been painted in recent years? The patterns on the window lattices, tusk, the painter is so good, it's a master. I painted the paint together with my mother a few years earlier. The patterns on the window lattices were painted stroke by stroke. Tang An said with some pride. She did not fully inherit her mother's talents, but she was a piano. Chess, calligraphy and calligraphy are all exquisite. In Tang An's eyes, his mother is just not good at speculation or unintentionally making famous. The works and performances of many so-called masters of traditional Chinese painting and art are far inferior to his mother. Awesome! Ye Gang looked a little fascinated. After a while, he raised his head and nodded in praise. This is a master. May I ask Ling Tangzun's name? Ye Gang is also a little bit familiar with art collection and appreciation, and can't help but become curious. My mother has passed away, she has no reputation, and these things are just her hobbies. Tang An shook his head, there was no sadness on his face, but there was obvious pride. Sorrow. Ye Gang paused somewhat unexpectedly. Tang An was just a teenager, and his mother must be young. This is regarded as an early death. My mother left the house for me, so I only rent it but not sell it. Tang An said again. Ye had just seen Tang An's expression, he knew that the house really couldn't be bought, but renting was okay, after all, my lady didn't care about these little things. Well, I will look inside the house again. Tang An took Ye Gang to look at the rented room again. After going around, Ye Gang looked at the environment and vision again, and decided to rent it. Then I first declare that after renting the house, I cannot bring people here often. After all, I still want to live. I like to be quiet and don't like people coming and going. I also have some other requirements in the contract. It's clarified, you take a look first. Tang An showed Ye Gang the prepared lease contract. Ye Gang looked at it, nodded and said, actually, this is not where I live, but one of my relatives. She is a girl and will go to university next semester. The family is reluctant to let her go to accommodation, so find a better place to live. Ah, it's a girl. Tang An was a little surprised. After all, he is a boy. How can he let a girl live with him under the same roof? Tang An suggested, in fact, there are many good houses around the university. Compared with those luxury houses, my advantage here is probably only this kind of antique taste. Ye Gang smiled helplessly, yes, there are indeed a lot of good houses around the university, but they are basically ordinary communities. Without the luxury houses you mentioned, the best house nearby is Wutong Lane. I just like this kind of antique old house. That's okay, I'm not a bad person. Of course, Tang An wouldn't make trouble for himself. He had to persuade others to find another house, not to mention that he didn't think he was a bad person, and the other party had no need to beware. So Ye Gang and Tang An signed a contract. Ye Gang paid Tang An's 4-year rent in one lump sum and will move in on August 30th. A one-time payment of 4 years' rent was a huge sum of money for Tang An. After Ye Gang made a phone call and reported Tang An's account number, Tang An quickly received a text message from the bank, which was in his account. It's 6 digits all at once. My relative, as a girl, is always a little reserved and proud, and girls always have some days a month, and their temper is a bit bad, don't mind. Ye Gang told Tang An at last. It's okay. I'm not a stingy person. Tang An smiled and shook his head. As a man, he always has to be more tolerant towards girls. This kind of demeanor is still there, as long as the other party is not an unreasonable person. Just look at Ye Gang. The relatives he would bother to help should not be uncultured. Tang An, after all, is too young. Successfully settled the tale and renting a house, Tang An was in a good mood, first went to delete the online posts, and then went to the kitchen downstairs to prepare lunch. From rushing out in the morning until now, Tang An hasn't eaten anything, and he felt hungry when he came to the kitchen. The two small buildings in the yard are connected in a semi-T shape. The first floor of the small building where Tang An lives is the living room and the kitchen. The kitchen area is much larger than that of the current ordinary housing design, and it is not too modern. The feeling of the kitchen, on the contrary, is that there is a large stove in the corner. Recently, Tang An plans to change this wood-burning stove to burn briquettes. Of course, the most commonly used by Tang Anping is the gas stove. The antique charm of the house does not mean that modern daily necessities are completely rejected. On the contrary, even if it is a mother, she always carries it with her before changing back to home clothes. Laptops and mobile phones, etc., are no different from ordinary office workers. Take the overnight meal out of the refrigerator, crush it bit by bit in the crisper, put it aside to dry, beat 2 more eggs, stir in the rice bowl for 3 minutes, and pour the even egg juice into the crisper inside, shake the box until the egg juice wraps each grain of rice, then pour oil in the hot pot, pour the rice into the pot and stir fry, then add the chopped green onion. A pot of fragrant egg fried rice is out of the oven. Mom said that the best way for a person to treat others is to let him eat well, and the best way for a person to treat himself is to let himself eat well. My mother always let herself eat well before, but now Tangan also wants to let herself eat well, even if it is an egg fried rice, it will not be so. After cutting a few slices of red sausage, Tangan ate a big meal until his stomach felt full. The feeling of hunger caused by excessive physical exertion finally disappeared. Came into the yard, there was a shade of trees, and there was a hint of cool breeze. Although the sun was warm, the lounge chair under the tree was still a good place for a nap. Tangan walked around in the yard for a few times before lying down. Not sleepy, Tangan opened his eyes, and the strange and inconceivable feeling in his heart once again filled his heart, especially the delicate and proud face of Nan Mao was extremely clear, such a woman who came out of a beautiful CG animation. The child is so harmonious with her background from another world. There should be no such a clear girl in our world, it seems that there is no staleness at all, clean and detached. But it still felt a bit interesting, not to say that it was completely unpopular, like a beautiful empty shell. Tangan remembered the way she drank milk and the reason for hiding in the cemetery pitifully. Tangan smiled, decided to visit her again in 2 days. Tangan does not intend to disclose the existence of Nan Mao or tell a second person, he must be the only person who knows the existence of Nan Mao at the moment. Nan Mao didn't let him know rashly. She was probably examining him after she saw herself for the first time. For more than 3 months, every time she appeared in the cemetery, she would say something or talk to herself. Or just told Nan Mao that she also understood and judged his character and Xingxing in the same way, and finally appeared in front of him as a human with a slight taste of gambling. Tangan doesn't think she is really a cat. In Tang An's eyes, she is more like a mysterious magician with the ability to become a cat, probably that's it. She could turn into a cat, she could turn from a cat into a human, she could hide all the milk under her skirt, she could make him grow a tail, she could make his tail disappear. It's amazing. Myself, the knowledge learned over the years seems to be unexplainable. The science that he believes is the truth seems to be shaken. Tangan can't help thinking that according to certain theories, when a person's worldview is subverted, his spiritual world will be broken and the whole people will go crazy. But such people are probably masters, great scientists, and the like. They only learn scientific theories in this way to cope with exams, and their own worldview and understanding of the world are also half-hearted, but they won't be affected like this. The big deal is that the theories he learned before are all narrow. Tangan thought with disapproval. He was itchy, and he wanted to know more magical things and more mysterious and unknown worlds through Nan Mao. Thinking about it, Tangan kicked and the rocking chair shook, and slowly Tangan fell asleep again, and the southern cat in his sleep once again entered his dreamland. The butt-to-thigh bottom blue silk and the delicate face were clearly visible. She raised her palm again. Tangan woke up in shock, jumped down from the rocking chair, reached out his hand to touch his butt, and breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he didn't wake up again and the tail grew on his butt. It seemed that the matter was really solved perfectly. Tangan stretched out contentedly, and then looked at the sky, watching the sun fall diagonally into the courtyard, the shadows of bamboo leaves falling on the ground, and the water in the patio. There was a faint golden light, and the scenery in front of him was still familiar and beautiful. Tangan was in a daze for a moment, as if that beautiful figure would still open the courtyard door at this time. The relaxed eyebrows converged, Tang An's mouth turned slightly, and he smiled barely. At this time, the phone rang. Tang An took out his phone and looked at it. It was Zhang Yueying, a high school classmate. Zhang Yueying was sitting in the front row of Tang An in the third year of high school. She has a good relationship with Tang An. Zhang Yueying is a very lively and enthusiastic girl, and she has good popularity in the class and in her age. After graduating from high school, Yu read www.yuganchu. In addition to filling out a volunteer and a classmate gathering, Com didn't have much contact between high school students. Zhang Yueying would chat with Tang An from time to time and call her. Zhang Yueying was also the most active in the class group. She made appointments with classmates a few times, but it turned out that Tang An had never been there. Tang An, sing K for dinner tonight, let me treat you. Zhang Yueying said straightforwardly. Tang An thought for a while. School is about to start, and it is estimated that everyone will be separated from each other from now on, and the party will have to wait until the winter and summer vacations, and the others will be ignored. Zhang Yueying still wants to meet, so she agreed. Then let's meet at Huahe Square. Zhang Yueying lowered her voice as she said, you look cooler. Tang An gave a and then he realized, what does it mean to be more handsome in clothes? Isn't he usually not handsome? Tang An scratched his hair, took a shower, changed his clothes and went out. In high school, Tang An belongs to the category of students with very good grades. He is also a top student in the eyes of the teacher. He has hoped to be admitted to a prestigious school. 1 month before the college entrance examination, the sudden death of his mother shocked Tang An, although he did not succeed in the next one. In the test, the score plummeted, but the teacher was still a little worried, and transferred the lively and enthusiastic Zhang Yueying to Tang An's front seat, hoping that she could drive Tang An's emotions and make him cheerful again. Fortunately, Tang An didn't get helpless. Her cheer had little to do with Zhang Yueying, but Tang An was still very grateful for Zhang Yueying's efforts during that time, such as carefully avoiding topics involving family members, such as speaking intentionally or unintentionally. Some celebrity deeds gossip with soul chicken soup, such as doing things that make people laugh. Classmates gathering, there is no need to arrive in advance. Tang An is a punctual person. He arrived at the time stated by Zhang Yueying. Tang An saw Zhang Yueying standing in front of the fountain in the square. Zhang Yueying is actually a pretty girl, or her temperament tends to be more cute, a bit like AKB48's Watanabe Mayo, especially after many people say that she is Watanabe Mayo. Zhang Yueying also tried her clothes and hairstyle. Imitating Mayo Watanabe made her gain a lot of popularity in the school, and then some nasty things that often happen between girls happened. Some counterfeit goods or actresses were often heard by Zhang Yueying. Zhang Yueying does not have a strong heart. After feeling uncomfortable, she no longer imitates Watanabe Mayu, but because she is beautiful and cute, she is still very popular among boys. Today Zhang Yueying is wearing a dark blue short skirt, a white short-sleeved shirt, a pair of black half-length socks, and a black canvas bag in her hand. She still wears the style of Japanese school uniform, probably the traditional Chinese school uniform. It's too depressing girls' love of beauty. This Japanese-style student outfit is very popular in Shanghai. In addition to daily life, there are also many girls wearing Japanese JK uniforms at various comic shows and cos parties. Of course, the so-called absolute domain is associated with this kind of dress. The white skin of the thighs exposed between the short skirt and the socks is very eye-catching and intriguing. Zhang Yueying's skirt is actually not short. Unlike Japanese female students, many Chinese girls wear safety pants when they wear such short skirts. Brother Ying, where are the other classmates? Tang An walked over and called out Zhang Yueying's nickname. Hua Suyan is a novel written by Tang Chi Gongzi, and there is a heroine in it called Brother Ying. The popularity of the novel is not low. After it became popular, Zhang Yueying gained the nickname of Brother Ying among girls, and the boys followed suit. However, Zhang Yueying has nothing in common with the assassin's brother Ying. Who told you that there are other classmates? Zhang Yueying looked at Tang An and pursed her lips. Hey? Just me and you. Why are we going? Suddenly dating me, I feel a little flattered. Tang An patted his chest and said. Ask you a big-headed ghost. Zhang Yueying's cheeks were slightly red, and she threw her hair on her shoulders. Just kidding, other students went to order, I'm afraid you can't find a place, let's go. Following Zhang Yueying, the fountain next to him shot out splashes, which reflected the light in a colorful color. Tang An looked at Zhang Yueying's back, especially the skin between the short skirt and half of the socks, a little attracted by the seductive color. I was taken aback for a while and realized that they were all familiar classmates, and didn't usually pay attention to this aspect. What's going on today? Suddenly noticed the temptation of Zhang Yueying as a girl? Maybe the weather is too hot, maybe the descriptions in the books I read a few days ago are too fresh in my memory? Tang An thought so, but was pushed a bit by Zhang Yueying before he came back to his senses. Zhang Yueying asked, Tang An, have you made up your tuition? Well, there is no problem. Tang An nodded, and said with a smile, don't worry, even if you don't have money, I can sell myself. Didn't you say that a versatile boy like me is the most popular with rich women? Bah! Then you have to get to know the rich woman first. Do you think it's okay to walk on the street and hang a sign on your body? Zhang Yueying hammered his shoulder and gave him a blank look. Tang An. It's hard to see what's going on, and I don't know if it really solved the tuition problem. This is a good idea. Tang An said seriously, I will call you when the time comes. If you encounter a rich woman who is too ugly, you must come to the rescue. No heart and no lungs. Zhang Yueying stopped laughing with him, pointed to a shop in the alley in front and said, Hey, it's there. Say it earlier, I've been to this place. Tang An smiled slightly, I have eaten here with Bai Yongxuan before. Ah, I don't know. Zhang Yueying said embarrassingly, and glanced at Tang An's expression. Look at what I'm doing. It's all things in the past, besides, behind which unruly man, there is no sad first love? Men, it is through this experience that they grow up and become more attractive. Tang An said in a vicissitudes of life. Zhang Yueying chuckled, this person is like this, he is relaxed at all times, making people feel that there is no pressure to be with him, and there is nothing to worry about. This is a small shop. In the middle of the old gatehouse and the grey street, a small lamp hangs on the shaking plaque. This kind of old building that remains before the founding of the People's Republic of China is occasionally in every corner of Shanghai. Unwilling to reveal it, it shows the history of the city. The history of the small shop is not that long. The owner and his wife started operating this small restaurant after being laid off in the 1990s. The small restaurant business is good, the taste caters to the public, the key is to clean up, the dishes are exquisite, and there have been celebrities eating here. The owner and his wife and the recognized celebrities took photos together and hung them in the store. It also makes people think that this store should be good. The star effect is not big, but it also played a role. Tang An and Zhang Yueying walked into the shop. Tang An hadn't been here for a few years, and the owner didn't recognize him anymore. He still warmly welcomed him to the small box and saw Zhang Mulan, a high school classmate, Zhang Fazhong, and a girl, Lin Xiaowai. They all played well with Zhang Yueying. Among them, Zhang Mulan and Tang An had the best relationship, but they didn't talk to Lin Xiaowai much. Tang An, you are finally here. Zhang Mulan patted Tang An on the shoulder and pressed him on the seat. First, we find 3 glasses of wine. We have had so many meetings in the summer, so you won't come. 3 cups are too many, just 1 cup. Zhang Yueying said with a smile, and poured a half glass of beer for Tang An. Brother Ying still takes care of Tang An in this way. It's a pity, your university is not in the same school, Tang An, there will be no Brother Ying to cover you in the future. Zhang Fazhong looked at Tang An's half glass of beer and said with a smile. What's wrong with not being in a school? Brother Ying can cover the entire Zhonghai. Tang An said disapprovingly, and then drank the beer in the glass in one gulp. Everyone laughed. Zhang Yueying poured a full glass to Zhang Fazhong. Zhang Fazhong yelled that Zhang Yueying was eccentric, and then finished the drink, but no one insisted that Tang An really drink 3 glasses of beer. Tang An, we will be a school in the future. Lin Xiaowai spoke, her voice clear and green. Tang An didn't know, she showed some surprises, and said, after I filled out my volunteers, I didn't go to school. It seems that everyone's schools are counted in the group. I didn't download the form at the time. Which department are you in? E-commerce, seems to be the direction of opening an online store. Lin Xiaowai said not very clearly. Me too, it seems that we are a major, but I don't know if we will be assigned to a class. Tang An said happily, I didn't expect high school classmates to be college classmates. Tang An, you reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Rabbits don't eat grass at their nests. Zhang Fazhong knocked the bowl and said sourly. Lin Xiaowai gave Zhang Fazhong a white look. Zhang Yueying giggled, Zhang Fazhong, it's been a few days, hurry up and get it done. Don't worry, Tang An will eat Jiying if he wants to eat grass on the edge of the nest, and he won't catch Lin Xiaowai's attention. Zhang Mulin patted Tang An's shoulder confidently, don't you think? Today I told you clearly that Tang An has always been the little brother under my cover. Is there a elder sister looking for a little brother? Zhang Yueying said angrily, what you said, I even have the last chance to confess to the school lost. I wish Sister Zhang can find a handsome guy who is the most handsome in the new semester. Tang An poured a half glass of beer for Zhang Yueying, come, a drink. Zhang Yueying glared at Tang An, what Sister Zhang? The food came, and the 5 people ate and drank. Perhaps it will be a rare gathering in the future. The atmosphere is very warm. Tang An smiled. To be honest, Zhang Yueying is really beautiful and has a lovely face. He is also very cheerful when he is with boys. It's awkward. Such a girl should be very popular in college. I hope she can find a good boyfriend. In the last days before the college entrance examination, the boys and girls in the school confessed crazy, the beginning and end of the relationship every day there are a lot of them. Zhang Yueying and Tang An have some ambiguous rumors, so few people have confessed to Zhang Yueying, and Zhang Yueying has also complained about Tang An. Tang An knows very well that, in fact, there is nothing between him and Zhang Yueying. It is just a high school friendship worth remembering. I hope I can make good friends in college.